like that, right?
You were fine. I took it in the best way.
Yeah, she said after. Big one.
Are you gonna tell them, they roll them already? They're rolling already.
Our connection.
Started.
Oh, no, no.
Right?
That's actually going to Times Square. That's the only one. There was one on 23rd and 8th.
Right, there was one on 23rd and 8th, there was also one on 11th.
Yes.
That's when I used to go.
Good old days. Good old days.
You guys, come in, Vince. We good? Everyone good? All right, to begin with, good morning, number one. Number two, I know yesterday many of you had reached out to me for a statement. I've always had a great working relationship with all of you, but yesterday was not the time for a statement. I like to have facts and put it together so that you'll have truth and what occurred. So let me begin with, on Monday, August 20th of this year, Police Commissioner James O'Neill rendered his decision in the case of Eric Garner. He said, and I quote, "Today is a day of reckoning, but it could also be a day of reconciliation." What Commissioner O'Neill should have said, but did not say, is today is a day of truth. I agree with Mrs. Gardner when she said they don't want the public to know how deep, how wide, and how high the wrongdoing in this case went. So let me begin by identifying this as a day of truth. Sergeant Kizzy Adonis is a working mother of 5 children who has an impeccable 17-year service record with the NYPD. She previously worked in the 7-5 precinct, one of the busiest and most violent precincts in the city of New York. While assigned there, she was responsible for training younger and less experienced police officers. She has never once been described by her peers as a good cop, but rather described as a great cop. The fact is, Sergeant Adonis was not, and I repeat, was not the patrol supervisor on the night of this incident. She was never directed by anyone or assigned by a dispatcher to respond to the scene of Gardner's arrest. None of that ever happened. Nope, Sergeant Adonis did exactly what the NYPD and the people of this city should want her to do. She heard a call on the radio and directed her driver to respond because she was nearby. She made an extra effort. Fact, Sergeant O'Donnell was the junior supervisor at the scene. She was promoted less than a month before the incident. The patrol sergeant at the scene was responsible for the officers involved who were on his team. They were his responsibility, to which, by everyone's account, he performed his duties perfectly. Fact, he was responsible for making notifications to Division Radio and supervising a team of officers involved. His responsibilities also included questioning them. Fact, Sergeant Adonis arrived 7 to 10 seconds after the alleged chokehold was concluded. She never saw the alleged chokehold, had no knowledge it even happened, until hours later when she was shown a video by the Internal Affairs Bureau. Fact, Sergeant Adonis' job was to remain present and ensure that the officers were following protocol. She did that. Fact, she inquired with her driver, who is a certified EMT technician, if Eric Garner was breathing and had a pulse. His reply was yes. Fact, she inquired and confirmed if an ambulance was responding and was on the way. She further admits to hearing the senior and responsible patrol sergeant at the scene ask for a rush on an ambulance. Fact, there was no further medical intervention possible without the arrival of an ambulance. Sergeant Adonis spoke, confirming with the covering patrol supervisor that he was handling the scene and informed her, he informed her to proceed to her previous assignment. The covering patrol supervisor then advised her, and I quote, "You go, I got this." Fact, when Sergeant Adonis proceeded to her previous assignment, Mr. Gardner was alive and expected to survive. Fact, Sergeant Adonis learned about Eric Gardner's death while at her borough command. Fact, Sergeant Adonis immediately notified supervisors that she had been at the scene and returned to the 120 precinct to assist in the investigation. Fact, Sergeant Adonis was questioned at length on the night of the incident by the Internal Affairs Bureau and later testified before the grand jury in Richmond County. Fact, Sergeant Adonis was also questioned twice by 2 separate teams of federal prosecutors. Fact, everyone who questioned Sergeant Adonis found her testimony credible, complete, and accurate. Fact, 18 months after Eric Garner's video was viewed around the world, and 18 months after she was questioned by the Internal Affairs Bureau, she was inexplicably charged with failure to supervise by then Commissioner Bratton. Fact, Sergeant Adonis was the only member of the NYPD at the scene other than Police Officer Daniel Pantaleo to face disciplinary charges. Fact, as we stand here right now, no reason was ever given as to why it took the NYPD 18 months to bring disciplinary charges against Sergeant Adonis. Fact, for no reason other than to placate anti-police activists, the Gardner family emissaries, she was then placed on modified duty for 3.5 years. Fact, we have always considered the decision to bring disciplinary charges against Sergeant Adonis to be irresponsible. We believe the NYPD's decision to continue the disciplinary process to be reckless. Fact, the NYPD was consciously aware of and intentionally disregarded the rights of Sergeant Adonis for nearly 4 years. It was and it remains a shameful chapter in NYPD history. Fact, this is also another example of how supervisors have historically been charged merely for being at the scene of a job that has gone bad. Fact, when Sergeant Adonis was initially charged, she indicated that under no circumstances would she plead guilty to any disciplinary charges. Why? Because she did nothing wrong. Sergeant Adonis had and continues to have the full support of the SBA, and our legal team was well prepared to fight these charges. Fact, approximately 2 weeks ago, the SBA was approached by the NYPD to determine whether there would be any circumstances under which Sergeant Adonis would be willing to enter a plea of guilty. We unequivocally refused to do so and said no. Fact, following negotiations with the Advocate's Office, we agreed to a disposition of the disciplinary charges, whereas Sergeant Adonis agreed to forfeit an accrued monetary value of 20 vacation days and not plead guilty to any wrongdoing. This is commonly known but rarely offered as a nolo contendere. She never pled guilty. Fact, this plea became acceptable to Sergeant Adonis, not because she felt she did anything wrong, because she and the SBA have absolutely no faith in the disciplinary system within the NYPD. We say this in consideration of a deal that was nearly complete on behalf of Officer Pantaleo and pulled at the very last minute. In addition to the existence of continuous policies of white shirt immunity that exist in the NYPD. Again, this plea was conditioned upon Sergeant Adonis' refusal to admit to any wrongdoing, any misconduct, and she accepted a nolo contendere plea because it does not require her to admit that she failed to supervise. Fact, Sergeant Adonis never failed to supervise. She did her job. She did exactly as she was trained to do. She was, in simple terms, sacrificed by then Commissioner Bratton in order to offset public pressure. We believe the NYPD disciplinary system is unfair. It has been widely criticized as biased and fraught with cronyism and white shirt privilege. We could not chance sending a completely innocent sergeant to trial in a system where Commissioner O'Neill made a deal and backed away from it at the very last minute. Rather than endure the stress of a disciplinary trial, which would have had a predetermined outcome, and placing her faith, her career, and a hard-earned pension in the hands of Police Commissioner O'Neill, who had exhibited a willingness to bend to the will of the mayor and the anti-police community, Sergeant Adonis took the honorable route and walked away from a broken system with her dignity intact. She admitted no misconduct and maintained she did nothing wrong. She simply refused to play pawn to the city's politics any further. This is the right decision for Sergeant Adonis. Adonis and her family and the SBA fully support her decision to resolve this case in this manner. I would like to highlight some factors that clearly show how broken the NYPD system is. As I stated earlier, I agree with Mrs. Gardner when she said they don't want the public to know how deep, how wide, how high the wrongdoing in this case went, and here's why. Fact, the NYPD has never stated that the assigned patrol supervisor on the night of this incident was actually the anti-crime sergeant. Fact, they also never stated that although this very same sergeant was assigned to cover patrol and anti-crime, this is a prohibited practice within the very same department guidelines to hold Sergeant Adonis and Officer Pantaleo accountable. So why then did it happen? Who is accountable for allowing this practice to occur? And how does the very same commanding officer in charge of this command end up being promoted to chief when a sergeant forfeits 20 days and an officer loses his job? Fact, Officer Pantaleo's interaction with Eric Garner was predicated on duress. He was enforcing quality of life offenses, and that being a person selling loose cigarettes. Fact, this enforcement was directly related to Commissioner Bratton's broken windows theory of policing, which states if you enforce nuisance crimes and remove unpleasant condition crimes, you will reduce the quality of life of residents, you will reduce quality of life crimes and improve the community that you're serving. Fact, no police officer wants to enforce nonsense laws and would much rather correct the condition. But we work in a structured organization, and orders had to come from headquarters to enforce these offenses in Staten Island on that day. Commissioner O'Neill admits this in his lead-up to terminating Officer Pantaleo. Fact, P.O. Pantaleo's enforcement actions were done under duress, as were Commissioner O'Neill's firing of P.O. Pantaleo, because the commissioner clearly stated he might have done the same thing if he was in Officer Pantaleo's shoes. The tentacles of this culture of misconduct and malfeasance runs deep and goes to the highest levels of this department. Ironically, Commissioner O'Neill supports the publication of police officers' discipline records. So much so that the NYPD violated Officer Pantaleo's rights to 50A with the publication of the Trial Commissioner Maldonado's report late Sunday night. Fact, Commissioner O'Neill was Bratton's protege, and his tenure has been anything but calm. He was appointed even though he had a dark cloud hanging over his head. As commanding officer of the Narcotics Division, officers that worked for him were accused of paying confidential informants with narcotics. Again, white shirt immunity. Fact, his selection of chief of department is responsible for violating the rights of 234 people, all of whom were arrested and declined prosecution by the Manhattan DA's office. The end result was a $16 million payout of taxpayer money to the plaintiffs. Again, white shirt immunity. Fact, under Commissioner Bratton, the NYPD suffered another corruption scandal where corrupt businessmen became cooperators and hurled wild accusations against numerous officers where high-ranking white shirts were allowed to resign with their pensions. Make no mistake, I believe as many do in this department that each of those men were innocent and became part of a culture that was widely known and accepted. And this is the incident in a licensing division that we're all aware of. However, some were not so lucky. Deputy Inspector James Grant, whose name was besmirched with charges, had the fortitude and conviction to fight the charges and was acquitted at a federal trial. For those uninformed, over 90% of federal trials result in conviction. I ask each of you, why is this allowed to happen? Why did then Police Commissioner Bratton run out the door after having a second turn at his dream job? Do your homework. The answers are obvious. Despite being a self-described cop's cop, Commissioner O'Neill outwardly has been in full support of Mayor de Blasio's progressive ideals, and a high price has been paid. Contrary to a secret deal for Officer Pantaleo, we all knew he was going to be fired when Mayor de Blasio made an announcement on a debate stage in Iowa. The Garner family will soon receive justice. The NYPD has fallen apart at the seams. Use your common sense. Each of you reports the stories. You see the increase in criminal activity and the less proactive police department. Since 2014, when Mayor de Blasio was first sworn in this administration, 7 police officers have been shot to death by armed adversaries. 3 were assassinated, killed as they sat in their police vehicles for no reason other than the uniform they were wearing. Under O'Neill's watch, the NYPD has 4 high-ranking and well-regarded chiefs, 2 of whom were females, with sterling records, were told to pack their bags and resign. No reason was ever given to them. Just as this morning, Jimmy O'Neill on CBS News indicated this department is better today than it has been in the last 2 years and in his time as a cop. I ask each of you, is he crazy? I was born and raised in this city. I've served the people of this city for 38 years. I was here for the wild days of the violent 80s and 90s and the take back of the streets for the people of the city. But in my 38 years, I have never seen or experienced a disdain for police officers that results in anarchy on the streets. People now feel emboldened to douse officers with water, hurl projectiles such as bottles and food, taunt them and threaten them, and behave in a manner they see fit to antagonize police officers. Just this past weekend, in the confines of the 7-9 precinct, officers were literally shot at. Mayor de Blasio describes this as a drunken crowd, and Jimmy O'Neill has said nothing. When people are arrested for these crimes, they're out the system before the officers finish the paperwork. Attacks against officers continue to ratchet up with no support from the mayor or the police commissioner. To all the chiefs, deputy commissioners, and union officials who sit silent as chaos reigns around us, shame on each of you. Shame on you for allowing and contributing to this path of destruction. Fact, the men and women serving in this department are good people. who often must enforce bad policies and be involved in ugly incidents. Sadly, this is what police work entails. But when things go bad, such as in the Garner case, they should not be abandoned by the elected and appointed leaders. No, those leaders have a responsibility to tell the truth. To the men and women of the NYPD, believe me when I tell you, the people of this city do support you. They need you. They depend on you. They want to be safe. There are poor people living in crime-ridden neighborhoods, trying to live, trying to fulfill the American dream. Do not abandon them. Stand shoulder to shoulder, support each other, be vigilant, and never quit. Do not back down. You are the only thing standing between evil and good. Police officers and detectives who find themselves in difficult situations, call your sergeant. The sergeants of the NYPD are highly intelligent, highly competent, and they will guide you through any situation. If need be, we will bring additional support to a scene. For the cop haters, water bucket throwers, shooters, and people who resist arrest and disrespect police, you do not own these streets, nor do you have the right to prey upon innocent people. We're coming for you. You will not be allowed to harm any member of the NYPD and walk away. This city, these streets, and all the benefits of this city belongs to the people. To Commissioner O'Neill, just this morning you stated on CBS News you are responsible for the safety of nearly 8 million people. You are also responsible for the safety of all the members of the NYPD. On Monday you stated that the cops probably don't like me very much right now. I don't believe that to be true. The fact of the matter is, the members of the NYPD do not respect you. They have no faith in your leadership, nor do they trust you. This department needs to change immediately. Commissioner O'Neill, I ask you for the good of this department. I urge you to do what is right and resign immediately. Mayor de Blasio, you will no longer be allowed to run this city on the backs of the working men and women of the NYPD. If you are looking for a problem with the NYPD, we will accommodate you. But I believe you and I both know this is the wrong thing to do, and it will accomplish nothing. To Mrs. Gardner and her family, I too want answers. We believe, and we all deserve it. I therefore extend an open invitation to the mayor, community leaders, political officials who truly have a sincere interest in healing this city and move this department forward. I offer you to work with you. We may agree or disagree on many topics, but as I stated, I was born and raised in this city and have committed 38 years of my life to serving the people of this city. It remains the greatest city in the world, served by the greatest police officers in the world, the NYPD. We cannot let this city return to the bad old days. And lastly, I want to reiterate, Kizzy Adonis is innocent. She never pled guilty. You were never told the truth of who was in charge that night and the dirty little secret, which is a common practice to not do, that occurred by having one sergeant do 2 jobs. I open the floor to questions.
Mr. Mullins, can you put this in context? How many police officers, how many sergeants faced charges and specifications in 2018? And what's some other conduct that's resulted in a vacation loss of 20 days?
I couldn't give you the exact number of how many. Penalties vary from anywhere from a day could happen to some people have lost 30, 40, 50, 60 days. Some people have been suspended. Some people have been terminated. Some people lose 10, 15 days. Each case is different. When you want to put that in context of how we hold people accountable, and we could use Sergeant Adonis, for example, of a failure to supervise, she forfeits 20 days of vacation time. But we promote the commanding officer who disobeys the rules to chief. How is that?
You're referring to Edward Delatorre?
No, Venezia was promoted to 1-star chief. He was commanding officer of the 1-2 at the time.
Do you have an understanding of how they came to 20 days? It just sounds so arbitrary. 10 days, 30 days. You know what I mean?
Well, as we stand here right now, no one's ever told us what she failed to supervise. So what I believe is, and a lot of people believe, is Commissioner Bratton under pressure from public outcry, decided to take the young, inexperienced, but not so inexperienced, because I don't think he did his homework to realize she was highly respected in the 7-5 precinct, and label her as the failure to supervise. And she was never assigned to even go to that job. She was never assigned to patrol. She was 26 days out of the academy.
What do
And
the
it's a great
charges and
cell.
specifications say?
It just says failure to supervise
It doesn't
without
enumerate
specifications,
how.
and no one's ever answered
And
us.
how much of the
How-
vacation days?
What
do you-
deal did you understand was in the works, and then what fell apart, and how did it?
I understand
okay,
Officer Pantaleo was keeping his job, that's what I understand. Not his job, was keeping his pension, he would be allowed to vest. And I know that to be a fact. You're gonna have to do the homework on it, but that was in the works.
And how was that contingent on what happened to Sergeant Adonis?
Well, there's a trust factor. If you know that this is gonna happen, and you change at the last minute, how in the world can I send a sergeant with nearly 18 years on to trial to defend herself when the outcome's already predetermined? It was predetermined in Iowa, on a stage in Iowa. I mean, you think about it, there's a bigger picture here. It's the mayor's election, and he's not gonna keep getting questioned. So when you wanna talk about duress, Jimmy O'Neill was under duress to make a decision. I mean, you look at the guy, he looks sick on what he did. But at the end of the day, it's done.
Now, the
Are
other
you
day,
saying,
he said there was going to be a trial, and then 2 days later, there was this, agreement, there was this settlement, so what happened?
There was a settlement prior to him saying there was gonna be a trial.
are you saying he was
It was-
disingenuous about that and he knew full well there was a settlement, or was this going on
The
behind?
settlement was not in his hands at the time of his press conference, but we were in the building. We had signed off on a settlement without his signature, and his signature was signed the next day.
So who signs off on that?
Trial commission.
How much of these 20 days worth?
Roughly about $5,000. But also take into consideration that we have a sergeant who did everything right, never been completely honest with what she failed to do. But she was modified assignment, front page of the newspapers. We're still talking about it 5 years later. 5 years later it took to figure out this discipline case, when we all knew the federal government wasn't prosecuting this case at least 2 years ago. 5 years it took that she's gone through hell and been disgraced for something she didn't do.
How much
Yes.
of a
Just
role?
clarify, Sergeant Saminoff, is that the sergeant that was?
He was the
in
patrol
charge of-
supervisor. Nope, he was the anti-crime supervisor who was assigned to cover patrol. And he did exactly what he was required to do. But he wasn't supposed to be covering both. And that lies on the commanding officer.
And was he there before Sergeant Adonis?
They're seconds apart.
And do you
Yes.
believe that scene that day was perfectly supervised?
Under the circumstances, what does perfectly supervised mean? Should I have a lieutenant come? Should I have the duty captain come? Should I do all of these things? I've done this. I've done 20 years in the street, always in enforcement. When something happens in the street, your priority is to first of all, you make an arrest. There's resistant arrest. And we can't deny that Eric Garner resisted arrest. Was it worth the crime? No. I think if we ask everyone, should we have been doing this back then? We can second guess it 5 years later and say no. But at the end of the day, we had a resistant arrest that went bad. He had terrible health conditions. On top of that, it compounds the situation. So you have an individual go down. When he goes down, you have a trained EMT who's actually brought to the scene, if you think about this, by Sergeant Adonis, because it happened to be his driver. And that EMT confirms he's breathing, confirms that a bus is coming, an ambulance is coming, and we're trying to get him out of there. If you watch that video, and I've watched it hundreds of times, I'm not impressed with the response from the EMTs. I'm not, okay? And, combine all of that, we have a sergeant who is covering two responsibilities, who fulfilled all the obligations of what occurred, made all the notifications, made sure a bus was coming. He did everything required. In addition to that, we had an extra sergeant show up who went out of her way to see what she could do.
If he fulfilled all the responsibilities, why do you have an issue with him doing double duty?
Because department policy, the very same book to which we judged Sergeant Adonis and Officer Pantaleo prohibited chokeholds, also prohibits anti-crime supervisors from going on patrol and covering both duties. I was just in a precinct yesterday, had a conversation with a commanding officer who confirms that to me. Says, I would never do that. He didn't know that. None of you knew that, did you? Anyone in here know that? Why not? Why not? Because it's in the very same book to which we judge the individuals in question. Two people.
You've just done the disciplinary system again? I'm sorry.
What's the current status of Sergeant Adonis? Is she back on the streets now?
Sergeant Adonis is, she's full duty. She's working. I don't know specifically her assignment. I don't believe she's outside as of yet. I believe she will eventually be back outside, and she should be. She should be.
So she has a gun back?
She has a gun. She's
now
been
on the
off
street,
modified assignment for a while. For some reason, I think she's doing administrative work at the precinct.
Do you agree with
I'm gonna go this way and
Commissioner-
bounce back, yes.
O'Neill said this morning that the Kizzy Adonis case would be the last disciplinary case they would do related to crime.
He's right about that.
But, once again, the word arbitrary comes up. Like, there are other cops. Garner
We're
had this
18
comment.
months.
It just seems so like, okay, so why stop there? Or why do it at all?
We're 5 years past the ability to do it. No one's telling you that. We're 5 years past the ability to invoke any kind of disciplinary action. You have 18 months to do that, okay? And to be quite frank with you, we're looking at other cops. It's not about other cops. The cops responded to assist an officer who was trying to make an arrest. Why? Because someone from above has these policies. That's what this is about. Why do you think we're not enforcing turnstile jumpers anymore? If you want to ride the train, go ahead. No one's getting arrested. It's minor crimes. It's minor crimes. They don't want another incident. You think Mayor de Blasio wants to be on stage and have another incident? It's not going to happen. So we're watching buckets of water be tossed on cops. Just a week or two ago, a woman in Greenwich Village was assaulted, and a police responded, and no arrests were made. You know, this is what we're dealing with. Look, I've been around a very long time. I grew up in this city. You know, we can talk about crime stats and everything else. But at the end of the day, the city's about the people. And we could debate what happened. If you who are reporting these incidents and these crimes are seeing what's occurring, the common sense question is, why is this happening? Even if Mullins is wrong, ask yourself, why is this happening? Why are cops allowing buckets of water to be thrown over their heads?
What role do you think the mayor played, what role do you think the mayor played in these decisions, the disciplinary decisions, and then the chief?
Puppeteer. That was the role. The mayor had the commissioner as the puppet to do what was told to do. Yes?
Commissioner O'Neill was on our morning show this morning, and speaking of Pat Lynch, he said, I understand he has a job to do representing his members. And I ask you this, he said, but please be careful in not undermining the confidence officers have while they're performing their duties on the street. And I was wondering if I could get your reaction to that.
In what context are you talking about?
He was talking about Pat's reaction and saying that he understands that that Pat has a job to do in protecting his members, but to not cross the line into making officers feel a lack of confidence when they go out and do the job.
Right, so I heard that now, and you got it. Let's look at what Commissioner O'Neill said, okay? He's concerned about officers gaining a lack of confidence as a result of what Pat said. First of all, I don't represent Officer Pantaleo, Pat does, number one. Number two, Pat didn't make the officers out there have a lack of confidence. This was created by the de Blasio administration and O'Neill. That's where this is created. Pat didn't make any statements until a day or two ago. And what was occurring before that? Buckets of water, things coming off rooftops, cops being shot at. That happened over the weekend before Pat even made a statement. This has nothing to do with what Pat said. Commissioner O'Neill needs to say certain things, and you have to understand that. And for the last couple of years, he said a lot of things. But not everything he says is true. And, you know, the rank and file, I talk to the cops in the street. The bottom line comes down to, I don't want to see any cop in this city, I don't want to see any cop in this country get killed. But the way we are operating right now, we just this past weekend in the 7-9 precinct, we can just shoot at police officers and say that it was a drunken crowd. I mean, we're playing with fire right now. We've had 3 police officers assassinated, all under de Blasio's watch, and while O'Neill was chief of patrol and chief of department, and he was actually the commissioner in Officer Familia's case. You know, this has got to stop. And if you talk to the rank and file, you all have people in the field that you know and you talk to. They're telling you what I'm telling you. They're not telling you this is Disney World out there. Someone here, I'll come up here. Okay, ladies first.
You said that the rank and file doesn't respect Commissioner O'Neill and he should resign immediately. Is there one particular action of his that you think?
Yeah, it's called his tenure as police commissioner. It goes back to the assassinations. It goes back to the protests in the street. It goes back to the Sergeant Barry we failed scenario, where every officer begins to realize, wait a minute, what's happening here? Why am I going on patrol and jeopardizing myself? It goes back to indecisiveness. You can go as a commissioner to every street naming ceremony. You can go to every event. You can go to do motorcycle runs, play hockey with people. You can do all of those things. But that doesn't make you a leader. It doesn't make you respected. It just makes you one of the guys. And he said the other day, I've been a cop my whole life, but I'm not a cop anymore. Well, Commissioner O'Neill, I've been a cop my whole life. Long after I retire, I'll remain a cop. There's a difference. Yes.
And are you instructing, sorry, just to follow up, are you instructing your members to do anything similar to what the people?
No, I'm instructing my members. Listen, I support Pat and what he does, okay? And he's got a different case than my case. But we're in charge of the cops in the street. We're responsible for people's lives. And at the end of the day, I want my sergeants to go home safe. I want them to be accountable to the people they lead, to make sure every cop that works for them comes back and signs out and goes home safe. And the people in the city who believe in us, who support us, they deserve to not be abandoned. And if it requires us as sergeants to lead the cops through whatever debacle they're in, then we'll do it. We're competent enough and intelligent enough to do it. Pat wants a supervisor, we will be there. If we can't answer whatever the situation is, we will go a rank above. We will utilize the resources this department has, but we're not going to allow people to get killed. That's not going to happen. Yes?
I was just gonna ask if she did, are you
Just
gonna
read
try
your
to
mind.
do anything differently here, given what happened with Adonis?
There's nothing to do differently. What we're doing differently is we're telling you the truth. We're telling you the facts of what occurred, okay? We can debate chokehold all we want. It's not going to change anything right now. I have my views, everybody has their own views. It's going to not change anything. The difference is you're hearing the truth. I gave you a scenario of white shirt immunity. I agree with Eric Garner's mother. We want answers. But don't blame the cop in the street that night. It didn't start with a 911 call and cops coming to help each other. They did what they're trained to do. There was a fight. Officer Pantaleo tries to stay from going through a plate glass window, and things went bad. No different than chasing someone who shot at you, you trip, your gun goes off and hits some kid in a baby carriage. That would be tragic, but it can happen. Yes?
Commissioner O'Neill had paneled two federal judges.
They're all full of beans. Mary Jo
6
White's
months.
panel is all full of beans. I sat with them. I have given them a lot of what I just gave you and more. None of that report said it. I gave them names, dates, everything. They've ignored it. They claim there is no white shirt immunity. Then I ask all of you, how do you promote a guy who's in charge? How do you do that?
The disciplinary system doesn't appear to have changed one bit since they went through.
No,
the
here's how the disciplinary system works. It works when there's a political debacle, and who are we going to blame? That's when it works, okay? I brought to everyone's attention Captain Noonan in Staten Island, who verbally abused people in that command. And what'd they do? They said they would transfer him. They would speak to him. Instead, they promoted him. What do we do with cops? We torture them. We send them to Viper units. We discipline them. It's wrong. It's wrong. You can't have a discipline system that lacks integrity. And right now, it lacks integrity.
Sergeant Mullins, what would you do if you were the sergeant and you found one of your officers had filled out a form incorrectly, falsely certifying that there had been no force used when there was, that someone had sold 10,000 cigarettes when he hadn't? What would you do to that?
I'd have to ask him. I don't know why he did that. Did he have the information? Was he told, here's what would happen? You know, here's what we have. I don't know what the answer is.
He was involved in the struggle.
He was, but that doesn't mean, how it works is I make an arrest, right? You're my sergeant. I come in, Ed and I are partners. He's doing paperwork. I tell him this is what happened. Or I'm going to the hospital. I got an injured hand. He's taking the paperwork. and he gets the wrong information. I don't know how that happened. I don't know. And the answer to that would be within that officer. Anyone else?
Could we just go back to Adonis for a second?
Sure.
I just wanted to ask,
Which is really the most important part of this.
There was reports that she, when she showed up, she said to the officers, they were on the ground, they were holding Eric Garner down, let up, you have him. Is that accurate? And also,
No.
should she have acted more aggressively to get the officers off Eric Garner?
There was nothing, if you watch closely on that video, she shows up and they're already down and Eric Garner is not resisting. What she does is has her driver, is he okay? Is he breathing? Yes. Is a person who's trained, has the skills to make these determinations. Is it a bus coming, an ambulance? Yes. She then works with the other sergeant. And she continues to her previous assignment and confirms with the other sergeant who says, I got this, you go.
So who was the person who could have said to Anselay or anybody, get up or back off or,
Here's what you have to look at. I've spoken to experts on chokeholds, MMA fighters, military Green Beret guys. I've been trained to do a chokehold, okay? Has anyone in here ever fallen backward in your reach or something? Well, in the process of falling backward, if you look at the video, Officer Pantaleo was holding on to Garner, okay? We can debate that. What I do believe is Officer Pantaleo wasn't standing there, sitting there fighting, saying, I'm gonna kill this guy. I don't believe that. I've not met a police officer in 38 years driving to work and say, this is what I'm gonna do today, get myself indicted. Maybe I get fired. Never seen it happen. I've seen crazy people, didn't wanna work with them, but in cases like this, there's so much more that's involved. And it's graphic. It's really graphic. The bottom line comes down to no individual should die for a couple of cigarettes. That's the bottom line. But his death wasn't intentional. And his death has now caused a tremendous amount of grief for many, many people, particularly his own family. And at the end of the day, we're in a very difficult time. And we need to get forward. We need to move it forward.
Was either Sergeant Adonis or the other sergeant, were either of them on the scene when both Pantaleo and Garner were on the ground and Pantaleo had his arm around his neck? Did either of
I'd
them-
really have to take a closer look at that tape. I watched it numerous times. I know that Sergeant Adonis shows up and they're already on the ground, but I have to really tell you where the hand was at that point.
And can you just give us the tick-tock of this agreement, when the agreement was?
Our agreement?
Yes, the 20-day agreement. When was it proposed? When was it signed off on?
This
When
was,
it approval?
This was being worked on really all weekend, from Friday up until we were watching O'Neill's press conferences. The paperwork was being signed. What was missing was O'Neill's signature, because he was on the podium at the time. That was supposed to come back to us that day. We didn't get it till late yesterday afternoon. But, you know, if you had asked me Monday afternoon if I had paperwork, I had it.
But he signed off
On
this?
it was given to us yesterday. It was dated for the day before.
What does Sergeant Adonis make of this whole thing?
Sergeant Adonis, which is sad, is looking to complete her time and move out of state. She's had enough. And the sad part about that is that for a police department that tries to be diverse and have talent, we're going to lose someone with talent who's highly competent and did a job.
Complete the time, meaning 3 more years, that was what that means?
It was signed yesterday. I'm sorry, it was signed yesterday.
So meaning she's 17, she's 3 more to go, and then she's moving out of state?
She's probably going to move out of state.
17 or 18 years.
I think she's close to 18.
However much time she has left, she has 2.5
Let's, for argument's sake, we'll split the baby and say she's got 2.5 years left.
Was there anything else offered besides the 20 days?
We wouldn't accept anything else, so it wouldn't matter what they offered. You know, we were planning to go to trial. We actually believe that at trial, we could completely exonerate her based on what we know and information that we have. But once Commissioner O'Neill balked minutes before his press conference, that's the telltale sign that this is a fixed system.
So he balked about what? Because he
The
said
deal
he
that they
was
were having with Officer Pantaleo.
But you'd already said you'd go in to sign a deal.
We were in, well, it's a longer story than what I'm giving you, but
So what's-
counsel was there preparing to do this deal.
with-
And I had received information that they were doing a deal for Officer Pantaleo. So I went into the building, we held everything up, and that's why he could not answer your questions at that press conference, because I had the paperwork at that point.
So when he spoke, he hadn't signed off on the
Correct.
20 days, so
Correct.
he could only say.
What he
there will
said
be a
was true.
trial, Right.
Right, what he said was true. He did not have that paperwork. Yes.
So just in the last few days, have you spoken to the commissioner on the phone? What was those conversations like?
Yeah, we're gonna have dinner probably tomorrow night. That's just a joke.
And then what was the deal they were trying to broker from Pantaleo?
I understand Officer Pantaleo is keeping his pension and he'd have to leave.
So he would have resigned, and then.
He would resign with his pension.
What borough is Sergeant Adonis in?
Brooklyn.
You said the mayor has been acting as a puppeteer over this whole case,
Well, the puppet master, really.
the puppet master. Do you think he's the puppet master of Deputy Commissioner Maldonado, who oversaw the
Well, it's
trial?
interesting you bring that up, because I haven't completed my research, so I'm gonna hold back on a couple of points. But there's a long food chain that ties them all together. And I ask all of you, why did the department violate 50A and submit her report the other night to the media? They broke the law. Who's responsible for that? Is there an investigation going on for that right now?
But don't you think that was leaked so that it's out there with a statement from certain people to
Well,
sort of
my theory is it's
quell
leaked. It's leaked because they have to change the deal at the last minute. That's my theory. All right, once the public sees this report, gotta get rid of the guy.
So you think City Hall leaked that?
Yeah, it either comes from City Hall, Maldonado, or it comes from somebody, because it shouldn't have come out. It shouldn't have come out. And I didn't have it, and I'm sure the PBA didn't have it, so somebody had to do it on the other end.
Sergeant, can you just briefly explain in layman's terms what failure to supervise means?
Failure to supervise is basically, I'm going to say, being negligent of your responsibilities to oversee the people you're in charge with. And I think negligence is the key word to something like that. If I am on patrol and I have cops that are not answering the radio, nowhere to be found, and I allow that to happen, not question where they are and they're missing for hours, I would say that's failure to supervise. What I would not say is that in the case of Sergeant Adonis, who hears something coming over the radio, self-initiates going to get involved and extend herself, gets there, checks to make sure her pulse is good, and call for a bus, I don't see that as failure to supervise. And even before she leaves, she's confirming that the supervisor who was in charge is going to handle this. That's pretty accurate to what you should be doing.
How many NOLA contendere type police?
Very, very rare.
Can you give me 5, 1, 10?
I know of one in my 38 years. I'm sure there's more. Andrew,
It's very rare.
very, very
Generally
rare.
granted if there's other
Very
pending
rare.
litigation, which makes a resolution impossible.
Can we say count them on one hand, or 2, or just to give them some sense?
1 or 2, yeah, I'll give you that.
I would venture to say that why that might have been agreed to is because the NYPD knows they have no case.
Why do you
And
think
that would be
Sergeant
a problem.
Adonis was the one who was targeted as a supervisor as opposed to the other individuals?
Listen, if anyone knows Commissioner Bratton, that's P.T. Barnum, okay? Commissioner Bratton, can sell sand in the desert. He has a junior sergeant, everyone's attacking, and what does he do? Offer up to the wolves. Here you go. You got a junior sergeant who's in charge. Makes sense, right? Junior sergeant, she screwed up. Logical. Great political move, but not a factual move. And that's where he made his mistake.
Could you also explain,
I'll come back.
just explain for us the difference between an anti-crime sergeant and a
Anti-crime
patrol
sergeant, I've done both. Anti-crime sergeant goes out, plain clothes, jeans, t-shirts, sweatshirts, kind of undercover type look. You're assigned to a team. You're supposed to work with your team. And the reason being is if you're supervising a team of 4 or 5 individuals, they're in different cars, they're someplace else. They could easily disappear. They are not necessarily identified as police officers. They may be in a situation where there's a mistaken identity. So you're supposed to be supervising them at the time. When you cover patrol, also in anti-crime, you're not on the radio queue, okay? You are driving around, looking for violent crimes, guns, robberies, burglaries, you know, really your 7 index crimes. You're driving around doing that. You will answer the radio generally as a backup or only available for a robbery or something serious. As a patrol supervisor, you're overseeing vehicle accidents, aided cases, EDPs, so you can't do both. And there's a policy for that, to not allow that to happen. And this department allowed it to happen, and ultimately we promoted the guy to 1-star chief.
You said that the failure to supervise, alleged failure to supervise was never explained. Were there not written charges or allegations of?
Just said failure to supervise.
That's all it said?
That's all it said.
It's a one-page document, doesn't say like,
How many pages is that?
1 page?
1 page.
there's no factual basis, it says Sergeant Adonis said X, Y, Z.
Wasn't like failed to show up at the scene, failed to render aid, failed, it didn't say any of that stuff.
And your conversation, are
We
you the?
filed a request for bill of particulars with the city.
Excuse me, if you could try to go to the microphone, please, so we can hear you and get you on record.
Sure.
It would be for hours now, you know what it is.
No, we will not.
Your name, sir?
Andrew Quinn. No, we filed a request for a bill of particulars with the Department Advocate's Office, asking them to identify specifically what Sergeant Adonis did that she shouldn't have done, or failed to do, which they believe she should have done. We never got a response.
So can you explain it once again then, from a lawyer's point of view? She didn't plead guilty, but the NYPD told us yesterday she did plead guilty, so explain what. and-
That's why today's the day of truth.
Yeah, but I mean, but from the.
I haven't seen their press release. I thought they said the matter was adjudicated for 20 days. I think the media came to the assumption, perhaps incorrectly, that she pled guilty. Probably because the nolo contendere plays such an unusual plea. Essentially what it means, nolo contendere is Latin, it means no contest. Meaning she's not going to challenge the department, they can take her time, but she's not going to sign a document that says she committed misconduct, nor is she going to raise her hand and say in front of any type of judge or anyone else that she failed to supervise or had any level of misconduct that rises to discipline.
Is that the term guard in the NYPD, nolo contendere?
It's a legal term, it's
In-
term out
used in
NYPD and
it's
other
also
places.
used in
Yeah.
force. Okay.
Do you know if Internal Affairs, when they interviewed Sergeant Adonis, said to her, this is what you didn't do or should have done?
We were told from the very beginning, everything was good. From the very beginning. The night of the incident, everything was good.
That she did nothing wrong?
They said everything was good, everything was proper. You know, not that the incident was bad, that we had a death in custody. Look, the NYPD gets deaths in custody. That happens. We have prisoners hang themselves, okay? That happens. So dealing with a death in custody, we do deal with. How it happens is a whole different story. But that night, I knew what was going on. I was notified by the people representing the sergeants that we were good. You know, this was an investigation that was going to continue, but no one was found of wrongdoing that night at all.
Can you tell us the name of the other sergeant who was on the scene and where he is now?
It was Samanith, we said, right? Samanith.
I'm sorry?
Samanith, I may be pronouncing it wrong.
S-A-M-A-N-A-T-H.
I'll go with it.
And what's he doing?
I don't know exactly where he's working, but he's full duty and he's out and he's doing his job.
And he was the supervising sergeant?
He was the anti-crime sergeant
Right,
that was told to cover patrol.
okay. So he
Okay.
had this dual role?
He had a dual role, and the significance of this is the book. A failed to supervise, a prohibited chokehold. What about that dual role that someone allowed to happen? We promote you for that. The very same book that we fire you and take your penalties away in time, we promote you if you're a white shirt.
Did he give the order to arrest Garner?
I believe if I'm correct, he didn't give an order, no. I believe he gets there after Gardner's on the ground, if I remember he shows
Oh,
up.
so he was summoned to the scene after?
There was a
the
call for help that came over the
conversation.
radio, right,
Oh, okay,
right.
and then he was there after, so now they're wrestling already on the ground, okay.
You got something? We good? Good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more.
You